pleased to welcome you. I am so pleased to welcome you to the 17th African Investigative Journalism Conference, co-hosted for the first time from Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. My name is Sophie Goldberg. I met some of you, but not all of you. I'm the IMS for your program manager based here in Ethiopia. And I'm really eager to meet all of you and to discuss and learn and network over the next 3 days. I can also say that we are here today because we're funded by the Swedish and Danish embassy, so thank you very much for that. And we are, of course, honored and really happy to co-host this conference. It's a hybrid conference for the first time, and it will be live streamed from 5 different cities, from Addis, Abuja, Dakar, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. We're one of the partners implementing this alongside Code of Africa and Premium Times for Investigative Journalism in Nigeria. Wits Journalism from Johannesburg are the primary host. I very much look forward to participate in this conference, listening to the local sessions, talking with you, but also taking part of the live streaming program. It looks really, really great. It's over 170 speakers lined up. So it's a packed program with discussions, with masterclasses, developing new tools, but really kind of highlighting great African journalistic work. I hope you are as excited as we are. Yeah, I think that's it. We are really, really, really happy to have you here. We're hoping for exciting days. And once again, big welcome. And now I would like to introduce our esteemed moderator for the next 3 days that will guide us, Ms. Meti Shawaya Yilma. A big applause. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. My media colleagues, invited guests, good morning and welcome to the 17th African Investigative Journalism Conference. And my name is Meti Shawaya Yilma. You will be seeing a lot of me in the coming 3 days. So, okay, good. How are you feeling this morning? How are you feeling this morning? I'm excited. Good. Okay, but I heard only from the gentlemen. I don't know about the ladies, but let me just speak on your behalf and let me assume that you're all excited because investigative journalism is exciting, right? Well, not sure about that. Okay. So this 17th African Investigative Journalism Conference is taking place in 5 cities simultaneously. It's the biggest so far, and also it's a hybrid one. So we do it virtually from all the 5 cities, and also there are 5 meetings or conferences happening in these 5 cities. Of course, our own Addis Ababa is one of the cities. Abuja, Nigeria is another one. Dakar, Senegal is the 3rd. Nairobi, Kenya is the 4th, and Johannesburg, South Africa is the 5th. So in these 5 cities, that is 3 time zones, and also 3 co-hosts are doing this conference for the coming 3 days. The primary host is Wits Center for Journalism at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. And we also have co-hosts, and the Ethiopian or the Addis Ababa conference is co-hosted by FOYO and IMS, or the International Media Support. FOYO works to strengthen and develop journalism and media around the world to ensure free, independent, and professional media and journalists. And IMS is a non-profit organization working to strengthen the capacity of media to reduce conflict, to strengthen democracy, and to facilitate dialogue. And WITS is a program and center for working journalists located in Johannesburg, South Africa. So in this 3 days program, I think you have the program on your tables. So we have this program, and we actually encourage you to use this program because the time is in Addis Ababa local time. When you look at the app, which is HOVA, by the way, you can download or install HOVA, WHOVA, and that is the official app for this conference, for the 3 days conference. So once you install it, you will search for AIJC, or African Investigative Journalism Conference. And in that, you will find everything about this conference. You will see the agenda, you will see the speakers, their profiles. You can ask questions, you can send all your questions on each session. And also you can network. You can put your contacts, you can look at other people's contacts. In that case, you can connect with journalists around the continent. And we, because that time on HOVA is Central African time, and Central African time is 1 hour behind the East African time. So that's why we prepared this, we printed this local agenda. And please, please, please note that we are following a very strict COVID protocol. We have sanitizers on the desk, and you are encouraged to use your, to use physical distancing, and also to put on your masks. I've ahead of time, I apologize for not wearing my mask, but I will be sitting far away and I will be holding my own mic, so I'll try to be as careful as possible. All right. Another thing is we will have late lunch, late coffee break, because we are following the Johannesburg time. If you want the house, the restrooms, you can just go this way, and on your right, you will find the restrooms. And we are going to take pictures and video of you. So if you do not want your pictures taken, please let us know. We understand that you may want to keep your privacy. So if you do not want your pictures taken, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll take it as you're giving us your consent to take your pictures. So the first session is going to be, of course, a very timely and a very important session, and that will be investigative journalism in Ethiopia today. That's the first session. So in this session, or in this 3 days conference, we have local sessions, we have plenary sessions, and we have master classes. So the local sessions will be within this conference hall. The plenary session is going to be live streamed. We'll be joining all the other countries virtually, and also on HOVA, on the app, you will see the other sessions, the plenary and the masterclass sessions, in addition to the screen here. So as I said, use the app, and you can send us questions when we have this 3 days conference on investigative journalism. So now let me just take my seat and let me invite the speakers one after the other. Okay. Do you want me to give you a minute to install Hova? I think there is a Wi-Fi code on your table, so. All right, so please help me in inviting our panelists for the first session. And I have Maya Misikir, Brooke Abdu, and Fasika Tadessa. Please give them the warmest applause. So the first speaker for the session is Fasika Tadessa. Fasika Tadessa is a journalist with 8+ years of experience in the media industry, working for both local and international media. Fasika regularly covers business, economic, and political activities in Ethiopia. She studied journalism and communication at the Addis Ababa University, specializing in print and web journalism. She worked as an editor-in-chief for Addis Fortune newspaper and stringer for Reuters. She is currently working as a correspondent for Bloomberg News. So that's our first speaker, Fasika Tadessa, and she will be focusing on current climate for investigative journalism in Ethiopia. So that is Fasika, and I think you're ready. We can start, right? Good. Yes, I will. Okay. Did you get the app? So we can proceed, right? Sorry? Yeah, it's on the table. In the Our second panelist is Brooke Abdu. He is an Ethiopian journalist with more than 7 years of experience in reporting and editing economic, political, societal, diplomatic, and security issues. Previously, Brooke worked as a reporter for Addis Fortune newspaper, apart from freelancing for local magazines. Brooke holds a BA degree in the English language from Addis Ababa University, and he just graduated this weekend, and now he got MA degree in local development studies at the same institute, the Addis Ababa University. Congratulations, Brooke. And our third panelist is Maya Misikir. Maya is a freelance writer and journalist based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with experience in reporting business, economic, and political issues. Currently, Maya is a reporter and editor at the Ethiopia Insight. By training, Maya is a lawyer, and she got her law degree from the Addis Ababa University. So these are our first panelists in the first session of this exciting 17th African Investigative Journalism Conference. And the title of this particular session is The Future of Investigative Journalism in Ethiopia. So our first panelist is Fasika Tadessa, and she will be presenting the current climate for investigative journalism in Ethiopia. So ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please help me in one Fasika to give her presentation and then move on. Make sure that if you have questions, you can put it on Hova, or later on, we can also take questions by raising hands. And thank you once again, Fasika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matti. Thank you, Matti, and thank you, the organizers of this conference. It's a very important conference for us, and thank you once again. And as we all know, investigative journalism is a very key element for globally, including Ethiopia and many other African countries. We might feel that it's a cliche, but it's not, because it's very important in a countries where there is where maladministration and corruption is rampant. So thank you again for bringing this topic for a discussion, looking into the investigative journalism climate in Ethiopia. Even though it's very essential and important, the niche investigative journalism reporting and programs is very unsatisfactory in many of the media institutions here. But that doesn't mean it's not practiced well, but at a very, very little, very small amount. So there are so many media companies that have investigative journalism programs or stories. For instance, the state-run ETV has its own investigative journalism platform, which we all know, called Aynachin. This program focuses on the social issues and tries to investigate problems in the government institutions or private sector. But as we all know, to uncover issues, but the coming weeks we see the government officials or some people get arrested or taken action against them. So we know that these programs are produced with the main aim of fulfilling the government's agenda or plan. There is also a program called Tagwash Nakash on Fana Broadcasting Corporate. It also focuses on uncovering social and political issues or national concern. And there are some radio stations that are focused on investigative journalism. But as we there are some issues that are undercovered by these investigative reportings. For instance, issues like corruption, land grabbings, smuggling, and other issues are not well covered by these media institutions. And there are so many reasons for that. For instance, politics, lack of professionalism and ethics are the major reasons for less coverage or less practice of investigative journalism. When we see to the professionalism aspect, there is a persistent issue in the media sector, because for years the media industry had been closed for foreign donors and media development institutions because of the draconian and repressive laws and the civil society law, which is not welcoming to the civil society. So there were no many trainings for the media professionals, so a huge problem in the media sector. The other one is some in the private media, journalists who attempt to investigate issues are not getting a buy-in from their editors, or they are not getting consent from editors, so they are not encouraged to work on investigative journalism. The other one is limited resource from the media institutions, especially from the private media companies, because they don't have adequate or sufficient budget to work on investigative pieces. They are not pushing on such kind of stories. As we know, investigative journalism needs time. For instance, it might take a month or two to investigate and cover stories. So as we know, most of the newspapers or radio shows have limited human resource capacity and time, so they don't allow journalists to work on stories that take time. So for instance, let me give you my example. I was working with one of the newspapers here, and I got a chance to travel in a fellowship program which focuses on investigative journalism. So I visited a magazine which mainly focuses on investigative journalism, and it's a quarterly magazine. They publish 12 up to 15 stories, investigative reports. So in their stories, they made so many changes. They they made the government to change laws. So after visiting that magazine, I was highly charged, or I was fired up by that magazine. And when I came back, I had a debriefing meeting with my editor. So I told him that I want to focus on investigative reporting because it's the most essential, or the key element which our newspaper is missing. So so give me the time and the luxury to focus on investigating items and publish stories, at least two stories a month. So he said, look, Fasika, don't you know that I also understand the essentiality of this matter, but we don't have time because we need to cover the newspaper with at least 10 stories a week. If you dedicate your full time on covering or investigating items, you will not be productive as the previous days. So I can't allow you to do that, but he said, let's negotiate. Okay, we negotiated, and he told me to to do investigative pieces every other month, or one story in 2 months. So I took some topics to investigate and try to work on stories. So the major challenge I faced was I was the editor of that newspaper as well. So I was highly engaged with the day-to-day activity of the newspaper. So I couldn't have the time to work on that story which my editor gave me. So finally I failed, and he called me, and you asked to do that, but you didn't. So technically I failed to work on that. So because of the time limitation and the resource limitations, I couldn't make it. And most of the media companies are facing this challenge to advance on investigative journalism. The other one is the other problem is regulatory problem, which limited us not to work on investigative journalism, because most of the government institutions are not cooperative while we do our jobs, like the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Parliament, police, and other government institutions are not collaborative. So we are not getting sufficient information from the government institution to investigate cases. And also the access to information law, which is under amendment, says that we need to wait at least for 30 days to get information from the government institution. And this can also be extended by 30 more days if the government official or the public relations officer believes that the extension. So due to that, it makes our work irrelevant, because after there's no point to wait for 30 days and cover a story while investigating the case. So that's also the other challenge. The other one is, or the major challenge, is safety and security of journalists. We are not getting safety, or we are not whenever we do stories, we have threats from different sides, including the private sector or the government or any other body. So due to that problem, we are not we don't feel comfortable to go out and investigate cases. So these are the major challenges. That's why I believe investigative journalism is not flourishing in Ethiopia, or we are not doing what we are supposed to do.
Thank you so much, Fasika. Let's all thank Fasika, please. Thank you. Yes, you gave us an insight of what is happening currently when it comes to investigative journalism. I have so many questions lined up for you later on, but the most important things Fasika raised are, one, the importance of investigative journalism and the impact it can bring, but also how finance could be one hindrance, because that's what we see. It's expensive, it's time taking, and also access to information, accessing information, particularly from government offices. So the current climate of investigative journalism is this. And let's go deeper into it, because what we need to assess what the challenges are. We're here not only to talk about what it looks like, but also to go into details of the challenge, and later on to bring or to find out solutions together, so that when we go out on the field, then we know what to expect and we know how to tackle it. And we'll also bring you solutions later on. Okay, so now I will invite Brooke Abdu, and he will be telling us about the challenge and opportunities of investigative journalism in Ethiopia. Currently, because this is a local session, we will be focusing on investigative journalism in Ethiopia, but we also take examples and overlook of the global scenario. So for now, Brooke Abdu, please tell us about the challenge and opportunities that we have here when it comes to investigative journalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meti. Thank you, the organizers, for bringing up this important subject to the discussion table. I'll be discussing the challenges and opportunities of investigative journalism in this country. So in general, journalism is not an easy endeavor. It has never been an easy endeavor, especially in developing countries like Ethiopia. And still now, since very long, we're discussing the same problems that journalists are facing in Ethiopia. And also, we also face new challenges such as technology that gives unfettered capability to both to those bodies that are adversaries to journalists and so on. So I'll be discussing challenges and opportunities of journalism in terms of internal challenges and external challenges that journalists face when they engage in their journalistic activities, be it investigative journalism or any other kind of journalism. So the challenges and opportunities that I'm going to raise here, they might not specifically only apply for investigative journalism, but they can also apply for the whole practice of journalism in this country. So let's begin by discussing what the challenges of investigative journalism concerning individual journalists are. The first point that I want to bring up is the capacity limitations that we have in terms of investigating issues, picking up issues, planning, and so on. So the practice of journalism in this country suffers from lack of capacity, and sometimes it's obvious that we're judged by what we produce, and some of our content is, I can say that sometimes they are laughing stock. So most journalists are also entitled for their opinions, and that opinion gets into the stories that they produce, and it sometimes compromises the core values of journalism, such as independence and balance and fairness. So we've reached, I can say that we've reached to a situation where we're lacking people who can ask the right question and get the right answer from their respondents, and this mainly falls on the limitations of capacity that we have. So because of this, for example, because of the limitations journalists have in terms of following leads and pursuing story by connecting the dots, we're lacking the bigger pictures of the stories that we produce. So we publish or we broadcast the bits and pieces of what could have filled the puzzle in the bigger picture. So in addition to this, there are limitations when it comes to creating networks of people who are potential informants for future stories or current stories that journalists are pursuing. So how do we maintain contact with people, and how can we build trust so that those groups of people or individuals can share their experiences or some kinds of documents that can beef up our stories that we produce. So these are the main challenges. These are the main challenges linked to the capacities of journalists. The other one is most newsrooms in this country depend on in-house reporters, and in-house reporters, as Fasika was trying to say, have a burden of getting the papers running or getting the broadcast running rather than focusing on long-term impactful stories. So therefore, similar with the lack of capacity, this also limits journalists from going to the distance, to the full distance of bringing up those important subjects after investigating and so on. So the third point that I want to raise is there is this deep entrenched, I can say, self-censorship, sense of self-censorship. Journalists sometimes get into the dilemma of what would be acceptable or unacceptable to some group of people. So when reporting their findings, or when they write or broadcast content, they rather than presenting the factors that they collected, they focus on the who would be displaced because of those kinds of reporters and so on. So apart from displeasure, fears of consequences also hold journalists back from delivering on what is expected from them when they engage into investigative journalism. The third point is technology. Well, the current world as we know it operates in a very complex environment. Technology has brought both both capacities and challenges for us. So digital literacy among journalists in this country is at its infancy, I can say. So this also limits journalists from using the capacity, the potential that these technological developments have brought up to their availability, but we're not using them to the maximum because of the lack of knowledge of what is out there and how it could help us investigate stories, develop stories, and so on, or even analyze stories. So the fifth point that I wanted to highlight is the challenges to access to information. Well, any of us can now go Google a website of any federal institution, be it a ministry, be it a commission, and so on, and you'll be surprised not to find what they're planning to do and what they have done, reports of what they have done. So the starting point for investigative journalism is knowing what's going on. Unless you know what's going on, unless you know what the governmental institutions planned and what they delivered, and the discrepancy between the plan and their delivery is a very important input for investigative journalism or any kind of journalism after all. So this might be linked to lack of an institution or an entity that is interested with distributing information from governmental institutions, or that mandates governmental institutions to distribute information in their disposal. So I'll now move to challenges concerning media houses. What as an institution, what the media is facing in terms of running and processing investigative journalism. The first one is media management and leadership. The state media, as we know it, is led by political appointees who are overseen by a board of appointees by the government too. Therefore, they are more of inclined towards maintaining the interests of the state or the government rather than going deeper to be concerned about the general public and so on. So the primary business of these governmental media, state media houses becomes protecting the interests of the government. When we go to the private media, most of the private media in this house, in this country, are run by individuals. Well, at least the most prominent ones are run by individuals who are more interested for the business rather than for the practice of journalism. So they are more concerned about getting the papers published, getting the broadcasting going, rather than having the content as an impact. Of course, they want they want their content is to have an impact, because impacts are what make money after all. So, but these limitations hold them back from carrying out investigative journalism, or from allowing investigative journalism in their newsrooms. The second point concerning media houses is financial and human resource limitations. This specifically concerns private or independent media houses. They depend on advertisements to survive in the market. Hence, media houses don't have that much financial space to send journalists out there to investigate and produce content for that will most of the time that will take 2 weeks and more. So this requires financial capacity. This also requires human resource that newsrooms can spare for that long to investigate issues that can fall into the category of investigative journalism. On the other hand, because of the financial constraints and limited human resources and the marginal capacity that the human resources they have at their disposal, we can say that investigative journalism is not being practiced in privately owned media houses. The third point that I wanted to highlight is intervention from external bodies, mostly from governments. The government agencies and regulatory bodies sometimes call editors to discuss on issues that they want to prevent from getting out, or they want to guide some kind of content production in newsrooms, and even sometimes they give directions on how to conduct their journalism. And this is more pervasive when it comes to the state media. State media currently produce content is called direction content. They are given directions from some kind of government and institutions to produce content and broadcast. Most of you might have noticed similar content is being run on state and even private media at the same time. These are called direction contents. So going to the external factors, the first point that I wanted to highlight is the general perception of journalism in this country. Well, I'm afraid that journalism in this country is an inch away from being designated as an enemy of the public, probably, because there is a diminishing level of acceptance that journalism, the practice of journalism, is getting in this country. People who have never read newspapers, who have never seriously listened to radio or television broadcasters, are judging journalists or media houses that they are not producing enough, they're not doing this and doing that. And whenever we go out there to seek information from the public, they say that, what have you done? Why should we provide you with this information? What have you been doing since years? So this is a very bad precedent. This is setting a very bad precedent that journalists are feeling irrelevant to this country sometimes. You see, therefore we have to change this narrative of journalism. The other one is the legal frameworks. Well, all of us appreciated the amendment of the anti-terror proclamation in this country, and it was also lauded by the international community that this country is moving forward. And for the first time, this country hosted the international press freedom conference in this country for the first time. So that was hoped that it would be a springboard for all of us to be free to exercise our journalistic requirements and so on. But as you can all know, as you all know, the recently enacted anti-hate speech and fake news proclamation is concerning for most journalists because of, especially because of its wider definition, and because of the power that it gives anyone to drag be it a journalist or an individual to the courtroom because of alleged hate speech or fake news distributed on their platforms. So even though the government was commended for amending the previous proclamation that were said to be hindrances to the practice of journalism in this country, such kinds of legal frameworks are also feared to limit what journalists can do in this country. So this might paint a picture that journalism in this country has a bleak future. But I think there is a huge opportunity for investigative journalism in this country, and we don't have just to talk about the challenges that we have. Regulatory, some people in the regulatory bodies in the government, we're seeing some positive perception towards journalism and so on. So technology has also evolved to help journalists investigate issues, analyze issues, and draw linkages between important or developments around them. The second one is there is also huge opportunity for trainings and capacity building. Someone can Google and find a short training or a long programmed training to build his or her capacity. Also, there is an improvement in the financial sector that can ease the financial limitations that newsrooms have in this country. For example, there are positive perceptions coming from people that opening a media can be a business, and so we can have more investment in the sector so that people can focus on the quality of the content that they produce. The other point is the amendment of the media law is also a positive aspect of journalism in this country. So it provides it provides for a diminished ratio between the content as media houses should publish in regards to the advertisement that they run to. So the ratio of advertisement is increased so that media houses can make more money from their weekly or daily publications. So the presence of multiple civil society organizations is also an opportunity for this country because they advocate for the rights of journalists and so on. And the growing number of educated people in the market can also feel those knowledge and capacity limitations that we have at our newsrooms. And finally, I would like to say that there are so many underreported issues in this country that we can address so that our investigative journalism comes to the expected level of impact. So these are the points that I had to raise, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brooke. So we've heard what the challenges are on the ground from the journalists' professional side and also from the media house and in general from the current reality of our country. So we know what the current situation is like. We know the challenges and opportunities. So based on all this, how can we create, or what will be the ideal future for investigative journalism in Ethiopia? Because we have to find the solutions for the challenge, right? At least we have to come up with pointers so that together we can build that ideal environment. What is it going to look like? So for that, I would like to invite Maya Misikir. So Maya, please tell us what the ideal future for investigative journalism in Ethiopia is like.
Thank you, Mati. So I think that moving forward, that collaboration is going to be a very important factor in having a strong investigative journalist journalism culture here in Ethiopia. And the reason I say this is also related to some of the obstacles that Brooke has mentioned. We have problems with, let's say, limited resources, limited time, limited journalists working on a story, limited money. And so having this network between journalists working across Ethiopia, for example, it's going to be able to solve at least some of these problems. Additionally, we will be able to cover underreported issues. If you move outside of Addis Ababa, if you move outside of the regional capitals, automatically you're reporting on underreported issues. So creating this link between regional journalists and then journalists working in even far out places is very key in strengthening this culture. That's what I believe. Another reason for another big push for collaboration is that we can do impactful stories, like I just mentioned, and impactful stories in the sense that we can also show the wider scale of the problem. For example, let's take the case of FGM in Ethiopia. The prevalence rate is really high. Similarly, neighboring countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Djibouti, Somalia also have high prevalence rates. And then we have the overarching issue of cross-border FGM. So if we want to talk about the affected communities and show how wide scale the problem is, we have to go outside of our comfort zones, and we have to start talking to journalists outside of Ethiopia, outside of the city, working in rural areas or working in different parts of the country as well. This goes without saying, but of course, collaboration also brings in the different skill sets of journalists. And I've learned from senior journalists my entire career working as a journalist. So I think that this is also one way to solve the fact that we don't have a lot of training when it comes to whatever different skills and tools that journalists need. So creating these networks is one way to kind of fill in that gap. And another very, very important factor of creating these collaborations and these networks between journalists is that it's going to provide us safety and it's going to provide accountability, because ultimately 10 journalists or 40 journalists have a stronger front than one journalist against, it could be, big corporations, or it could even be the government. One example I want to give is this one time last year, we were covering floods in Afar region. So I traveled there with a photographer. We were trying to see, what the relief was like, how the affected community was being helped. So while we were traveling, so we got to Afar, and while we were traveling from one school to another, the schools were being used as temporary shelters at the time, we got stopped by a policeman. And he stopped us, he interrogated us, we told him what we were doing, who we were, we had IDs, all of that, but none of that would suffice. He took us to the police station, and, a lot of journalists would maybe relate to this, but there's that moment when you realize this has gone from an inconvenience on your time to something that is a bit worrisome. So at that time, I texted my editor and I said, this is happening, they're taking us to the station. And immediately what she did was she told me that she'd reached out to other journalists, other networks, including the Human Rights Commission and other CSOs. So they're on the go. So they're ready. If anything is going to happen, that they would alert these network of people. And for us, that was like a safety net. That was our source of comfort. So I really believe, especially now with the conflict that's going on in the country, with a lot of sensitive issues, investigative journalism touched upon very sensitive issues, corruption and maladministration, and a lot of, there could be strong backlash. And so I believe that like creating networks and collaborating is one of the ways we can protect one another. Another thing that I think right now is making collaboration even more important is technology. We have seen, especially with regards to the war that's happening in the country, a lot of different claims coming from different sides. And we have been able to see that some of these claims have been corroborated by satellite imagery analysis, by visual analysis techniques, which we don't have in this country. So while we, the journalists here, are doing the work, we're here talking to the people, we're there at the places, how are we able to talk and collaborate with these organizations that can verify testimonials? So we need to be able to make this happen to show the wider impact of our work. The ideal future of investigative journalism in Ethiopia would definitely also have to focus more on trainings and building our tools, as the tools that we have as journalists here in the country. I know because, they also mentioned it, but because of the reformed CSO law, now we are seeing more and more media development organizations. There's around 18 now. A good example is FOYO, IMS, Dolce Vele Academy. I've personally worked with Internews. There's CARD Ethiopia, the Center for Advocacy of Rights and Democracy. So they're working on very important things, including fact checking, conflict sensitive reporting, which I think is super important. We really need to practice a trauma-informed journalism right now, because what we are doing right now, we need to be able to make sure that we are not causing more harm when we talk about affected communities, when we talk to people that have survived conflicts, trauma, abuse, and a lot of other issues. So what is the language that we are using? And we need to be able to have, be cognizant of these things. So moving forward, and especially even right now, I'm sure a lot of you are aware, this is something that we need to incorporate into our investigative journalism. Finally, just a couple of points I would like to make is mentorships. I've been mentored by excellent reporters and like Fasika here. And I believe that mentorship is super important. Where we do not have the trainings, where we do not have the budget to have these kind of programs, then we can create our local networks of mentors, because there are very brilliant journalists with long years of experience who have a lot to teach us. As it relates to funding, there are a lot of issues with funding as well, but a part of it, I think, can be solved through Ethiopian local media house policies being a little bit relaxed, being encouraging to journalists to go out and find funding, encouraging even the media houses as a policy to go and actively seek funding, because there is certain funding, and I do not think that we are making the best out of it. One good example here is when the war had just broken out, we wanted to do a story on the healthcare services in Tigray region. How have they? We knew that they had been impacted. We knew there was a very important story to be told, but we did not have the budget at the time to do it. So what we did is we had a meeting, we had an editorial meeting, we figured out an angle to do the story, the potential people that we're going to talk to, elements that we're going to include in the story. And then at that time, Internews was giving out funding for certain stories to be covered in Ethiopia. So we applied for that funding and we got that funding. I was able to go and do the story last March, and it was an important story. So I know not a lot of media houses are, as encouraging as the one I was working in was. So I think they need to be more relaxed. They need to encourage while still maintaining their editorial integrity. And then what Brooke had mentioned, especially with like this stringent policy of having only in-staff reporters, it's really doing more damage than it's creating any good things, because on the one hand, we all know that journalism is not a very well-paying job in this country. So a person has to make their livelihood. So whilst allowing, journalists to meet their needs, you can still kind of have a relaxed approach and not have all your reporters be in staff. On the other hand, this will also allow media houses to also get temporary reporters whenever they're doing like in-depth or extensive investigative journalistic works. With regards to this, I think that CSOs and organizations working on different issues also need to fund journalistic endeavors, because if an organization is working on environment, on climate change, on human rights, on anti-corruption, this automatically ties in with the work of journalists because of the ability that they have to shed light on the issue, as well as their ability to amplify the voices of the affected communities, which they're probably working on. One very important element is keeping our publications multilingual. That's what I really think is important, because while I think there's not a shortage of these clickbait news or different types of just maybe even misinformation going out on social media, in-depth investigative journalism is not that. It's not a lot. It's not happening often. So when it does happen, when we're doing a story in Sidama like that, when we're doing a story in Oromia region, when we're doing a story in the South, then we need to be able to get a translator, get that content that we did and translate it so that the communities there also understand what has been happening, so that our impact is also felt throughout Ethiopia, through the affected communities, not just in Addis or in Amharic or in English. So I think we need to keep it multilingual. one final thing, this is literally, okay, this is the final thing I would like to say is, in a lot of media houses, a very neglected part is the actual mental health of journalists themselves. Everywhere I go, including myself, this is something I've experienced. There's constant burnout, there's constant fatigue. And if we really want to make this a sustainable, if we want to make this sustainable, if we want to have the investigative journalistic sphere strong, to make that culture strong, then we need to start looking after our journalists. Media houses need to incorporate certain policies that will take care of these critical journalists who are doing critical work. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. Really, you pointed out what an ideal future for investigative journalism in Ethiopia should look like. And I think that's why we're here, to make that happen and to make it a reality. Right now in Nairobi, a simultaneous session is going on government-driven misinformation. At 10 o'clock our time, we will be opening the conference that's virtual, and then we will have a plenary session where we all attend, and that is going to be behind the Pandora Papers and everything that Maya mentioned about collaboration, working together, financing, and all those things. The ideal scenario for investigative journalism is actually seen on the Pandora Papers. It's fascinating stories. Be watching it very soon. We'll attend that plenary session. Okay, so we only have 19 minutes. So let me just ask a few questions before I open up the floor. So yes, we talked about, first of all, thank you so much for your time, for your insight, and also for including your personal stories into this. I really want to commend you for doing investigative journalism, because I have a confession to make. I took a 3 months investigative journalism, and the day I received the certificate was the day I decided not to do investigative journalism. I said, no, I'm brave to do this. I do not want to risk my life because, you know, there is a saying in Amharic, Farilan Natu. You know, a not so courageous person would live with their mom for a long time. So I decided to do that. But those courageous people, and some of you here, you are dedicating your life for the truth and to show us that. So I would like to really honor you for doing that. And I bring this as to talk about the risk. You're not safe on the ground. You're not safe as an investigative journalist. While the challenges are there, the challenge that you mentioned, how do you protect yourself on the ground? How do you measure the risk? This is for all of you, but for Fasika and Maya, I want you also to focus on, as a woman, how do you navigate through this challenging profession? So let's start with Maya here. So let's go reverse. So how do you protect yourself? How do you measure the risks? And how do you navigate as a woman?
So, you know, whenever we do some story happening in areas or around issues that are not completely safe, then, you know, we have a very we have a get together with the editorial team, and we discuss, like, you know, what is the safest way to do the story. And it's always, I think, about like taking calculated risks. I remember my one advisor from my previous media house telling me, like, don't be a hero, like, just don't, there's no need to go to an the risks need to kind of match what you're putting out there. So if it's already a story that has been covered, and to a certain degree you're just shedding light on you know, other elements, then, you know, you push a little bit more. But it's always it's just taking these calculated risks. And as far as being a woman in this field is concerned, I'm sure there are very, very uncomfortable moments, of course, much like just being a woman and existing kind of entails. But again, this is also something you mentioned earlier. There's like this gut feeling that you have, which you follow. But then also, this is what I meant earlier when I said we need more training so that we have an informed gut feeling. Do you know what I mean? So we know how to navigate these spaces. So so far, it's been a combination of taking the assessed risks and a little bit on the gut feeling, and a little bit also being aware that this is happening, whatever I may be doing, that this may happen, whatever I may be doing as well. So that's what I would have to say. I don't know what Fasika might add.
Okay, thank you, Honest. Brooke, let me come to you. I know you have a daughter. So having a child as an investigative journalist means you're not only risking your own life, you're risking the life of your daughter, of, you know, taking away a father from her if something happens. So having a child, how did it affect your bravery? Let's say that. Did it make you more courageous, or did it make you more cautious? How did that dynamic change?
Well, this is two personal questions. It's very difficult to reflect on it, but definitely it affects what I do. For example, before I had my daughter, I used to travel out of Addis to report on issues. For example, I've been reporting on conflict in different parts of the country. Let's say immediately before the Sidama referendum, there was a conflict there. I was reporting about that. I also used to travel to other parts of the country to report on roads, locust infestations, and so on. But you and what? Well, I believe that, I don't know. In my belief, I don't have. There is, especially when it comes to journalism, we don't have to be that much hero, and it's not worth losing our life. I believe that. So I think we have to be cautious to that extent, and we don't have to risk ourselves, even if we don't have that kind of personal issues that reserve us from going to the. I think we have to navigate through the challenges that we see.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brooke. I know it's a very difficult subject, but I also understand there are parents and journalists who are having that trouble. Personally have that trouble. That's why I asked, but thank you so much. Fasika, what's your take on all of this, on the challenge of the challenge of being a woman, or maybe advantage of being a woman in this investigative journalism scenario?
I can say female journalists are the best investigative journalists because they have all the skills and abilities to crack information from different people. So I say it's they are best in investigating stories. Coming to my experience as a woman, as a mother, I always try to calculate risks while working on stories. And I should admit that I dropped so many stories, fearing that something bad could happen on me. For instance, I was working on a story that involved, there was a procurement of tablets for the census that was scheduled to take place 2 years back. So there was a huge corruption in that case. So there were so many parties involved in that process, like the foreign companies, the government officials, and so many parties were involved. So the threat was coming from every corner of or every side of parties who were involved in the process. Even I was receiving a call from government officials threatening me to even to the label I might lose my life. So I sat down and think of the impact I could bring doing that story, or the outcome of the story, and at the same time risking my life. So I completely dropped that story, knowing that that was not the right thing when we come to the code, the ethics of journalism. But since there was no system that protects my life and my family, I dropped that story. So it's always a struggle. You try to calculate the risk, and in fact, investigative journalism gives you, it boosts your confidence, and it will help you to earn respect or recognition from different parties. You would be a popular or famous journalist, but at the same time, the threats coming from those who are not happy with the stories it weighs. So I always try to calculate the risk, and assuming what could happen to me, I sometimes proceed with the stories, and most of the time I drop, because there's nothing that protects me from the threats coming.
Well, thank you so much once again, Brooke and Maya, especially for sharing what you have been going through, because that also gives us what you face on a daily basis. And we would like to say thank you for bringing the truth to us. So we have 9 minutes where we go on the plenary session, and the opening of this conference, the Investigative Journalism Conference, I will stream live, but let me give an opportunity to 1 or 2 questions. So if you have questions, raise your hand, we'll pass on the microphone. Your name, your organization, or your position in that organization, and then brief question for whoever you want to address it to. If you have questions, let's see. Let me see your hands. Good. So we have 1 question. Let me just pass on my microphone. Do we have extra microphone, or shall I give my? Okay, there is microphone. So let's take 1 question. And if time permits, we'll take another question. So here, the gentleman wears glasses.
Thank you. My name is Teshagar. I'm from Addis University. I'm a teacher there. First of all, I would like to thank the presenters, Fasika, Abdu, and Maya. They were wonderful, actually. We have got a lot. My question is, in their presentations, they emphasized, or I think they have an assumption that investigative journalism is practiced at the higher level, such as investigating big companies, big powerful bodies, etc., etc. It is true. This is really a challenging task, but we should not limit the scope of investigative journalism to a higher level, which involves multi-billion companies, high government officials, etc. But still we have lots of corruptions taking place around us. We are eating fake foods. There are organizations selling fake academic credentials. There are pharmacies selling expired medicines, etc., etc. Corruption is everywhere. So investigative journalism could be practiced at every level. This is very important to know. So when we go to the grassroots, the challenges may not be as serious as mentioned before. So it's better to start from there. There are actually success stories as long as investigative journalism is concerned. There are many interesting stories which expose corruptions at grassroots level. These are very important things. So we need to focus on that instead of limiting them to a higher level. The other thing, what about the importance of editorial policies in each media organizations? As long as we don't have anything mentioned about investigative journalism in our editorial policies, we cannot practice it, because our commitment could not be explicit as long as we don't
For the interest of time, could you please reframe your question, because we have to go live in about 6 minutes. Okay.
So just to see the issue from that perspective, that is the point. The other is our media houses.
Do you have 1 question? I'm sorry, I have to cut you because we don't have time.
the role of editorial policies in practicing IJ day to day.
Thank you so much. Okay, any one of you would like to respond to this? What role the editorial policy plays in investigative journalism? Any one of you?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Teshaga. As far as I know, most of the media institutions support investigative journalism, but the level of or how much they are going deep into the issue is the problem. So most of the private media companies support investigative journalism, but they are not doing as they plan or as they think because of the financial and the human resource problems that we have been mentioning before. And also from the government side, they are, even though they are state medias, they are serving the government. So their coverage or their scope of coverage is mainly depending on the interest of the government or the officials or the head of the media companies that are mostly political appointees. So their editorial policy supports investigative journalism, but the way they practice that is not up to the expectation of the public or what they are supposed to cover or to do. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
Is there one question? A very brief question, very brief. Okay, thank you. Your name, your organization. Mike. Great. This is a hybrid event, so we have to be on time to keep up with the other 4 countries. That's why.
Okay, my name is Masood and I come from the consortium of Ethiopian human rights organizations. And I thank you all for organizing this very important event in Addis. And when I come to my very brief questions, actually I had lots of questions, but for the interest of time, I will come back with the rest. How you see the impact of social media on investigative journalism? You guys, I was expecting any of you to raise the social media because there is no accountability as such that people write whatsoever they like. And even if you come up with some investigation on some factors, it has been already on air for a couple of days. And how you see the role of journalists themselves to claim the space. I've been engaged in the media law preparation, and none of you, I mean, most of you were not engaged in the media policy reforms, except very few committed. So if you don't claim your spaces, then who is going to?
One question.
Yeah,
yourself. So I'll take the social media question. Thank you very much. The others will come back later. We have more time. Trust me.
My last question is on fact checking.
No, I asked for one question. We only have 2 minutes. Okay. So social media, the role of social media. So who would like to say something about social media? We talked about that. So Maya or Brooke. Okay.
I'm going to keep it also very brief in the interest of time, but this was something I was talking about in terms of creating, a very strong investigative journalistic culture here, that we as journalists need to familiarize ourselves with these tools, with fact-checking tools, with, being able to navigate social media spaces. And because when it comes to, like you said, like with resources, we can't match the resources of government or other big corporations who want to push a certain agenda or who have their own propaganda or their own ideas to push. So we have to be able to step with that and kind of familiarize ourselves with all the tools that we can possibly use, so that we can also serve a very important role in verifying the claims, and then also using these specific tools to back up and to strengthen our own investigative pieces.
Okay, thank you very much. Probably there was a colleague of mine who used to say that what most of the reportings in this country are investigative reportings. And probably Dr. Teshale's question might relate to this, and because they want the journalists try to get exclusive contents out of events and so on, and they try to come up with specific contents that they can publish or broadcast. And when we come to the impact of social media, probably to add one point, what on what Maya have been saying. They are sometimes used to bully journalists who conduct investigative journalism or other kinds of.
So yes, we are about to go live for the opening session of the conference. This is 1 hour early because we are an hour ahead. So ladies and gentlemen, please say thank you and appreciate my panelists, Fasika, Brooke, and Maya. The current, yes, investigative journalism in Ethiopia. And we talked about the challenge, the opportunities, the current situation, and also the ideal future of the investigative journalism scenario in Ethiopia. So now we're going live, and we are going to attend the other, this one was local, only for Addis, and one was going on in Nairobi simultaneously, but now all the 5 countries, all the 5 cities, Addis, Abuja, Nairobi, Dakar, and Johannesburg, live. So I will take you there and I will come back after that. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Addis, and of course us here at Wits University, the Wits Club at Wits University in Johannesburg. So gatherings in 5 cities, as well as live streaming all of the program. I think we can say this is our most Pan-African conference yet. We're proud of it. I must it is FOJO International Media Support. Joburg, we're based at Wits Journalism, as I said, the journalism department at the University of the Witwatersrand. Techniques, forensic and other techniques, and much more. Let me talk about some of the highlights that I hope you are able to take part in over the next few days.